She came home with a designer bag. "A gift from a business partner," she said. I nodded calmly. The Hermes leather gleamed under our kitchen lights like polished obsidian, its gold hardware catching every reflection. Vanessa set it on the marble counter with the reverence of someone handling a religious artifact. At 2 a.m, no less. "That's quite a partnership," I said, keeping my voice steady while my mind catalogued the details. The bag was pristine, still had that new leather smell that screams 5 figures. Must have been some meeting. Vanessa's fingers traced the clasp, not quite meeting my eyes. Helena Vance closed the Morrison account tonight. The whole team celebrated. Helena Vance. I knew that name from Vanessa's work stories, the venture capitalist with ice in her veins and money in her pockets. But Helena struck me as the type who celebrated with champagne, not luxury handbags for junior associates. "Generous of her," I said, opening the refrigerator to grab a water bottle. The cold air felt good against my face, gave me a moment to process. When did Helena develop such personal taste in gifts? She has excellent style. Vanessa's voice carried that particular strain I'd been hearing more often lately, the sound of someone constructing truth from convenient materials. You know how these corporate types are. Image matters. I twisted the cap off my water, took a long drink, and studied my wife of 15 years. Vanessa had always been beautiful, sharp cheekbones, auburn hair that caught light like copper wire, green eyes that could freeze or melt depending on her mood. Tonight, those eyes held something I couldn't quite identify: guilt, excitement, fear. "I'm sure it does," I said, "though I have to admit, I'm surprised Helena knows your taste so well." The comment hung in the air like smoke. Vanessa's hand stilled on the bag's surface. "We've worked together for months, Elliot." She pays attention to details. Details. Right. Like how Vanessa had been working late 3 nights a week for the past 2 months. Like how she'd started wearing different perfume, something expensive and sophisticated that replaced her usual vanilla scent. Like how her phone had developed a sudden need for privacy, always face down on surfaces, always out of casual viewing range. "Well," I said, setting my water on the counter, "I hope you thanked her properly." Something flickered across Vanessa's face, too quick to interpret, too deliberate to ignore. "Of course I did." She lifted the bag, cradled it against her chest. "I should get some rest. Tomorrow's another long day." I watched her walk toward the stairs, designer leather clutched like a shield. Her heels clicked against our hardwood floors with military precision, each step measured and purposeful. At the base of the staircase, she paused. "You're not coming up?" "In a few minutes," I said. "Need to finish some work." She nodded and disappeared upstairs, leaving me alone in our kitchen with questions multiplying like compound interest. I'm a data analyst by trade, have been for 12 years since leaving MIT, with a degree in applied mathematics and a talent for finding patterns in chaos. Numbers don't lie. They can be manipulated, misrepresented, or misunderstood, but they don't lie. People, on the other hand, lie with the casual frequency of breathing. The bag bothered me. Not just its existence, but its timing, its presentation, its explanation. Helena Vance was known for her business acumen, not her gift-giving generosity, and junior associates at Whitfield and Crane Ventures didn't typically receive 5-figure presents for closing accounts. I pulled out my phone and did what any reasonable husband would do in 2024. I checked the Find My iPhone app. Vanessa and I had shared locations for years, a safety measure that had never felt invasive until now. The blue dot showing her location history painted an interesting picture. According to the data, Vanessa had spent the evening at the Meridian Hotel downtown, not at Whitfield and Crane's offices, not at any restaurant I could identify. The Meridian, where rooms started at $400 a night and privacy came standard. I screenshotted the information, then opened her calendar app. We'd shared digital calendars since getting married. another convenience that had evolved into something more revealing. Her recent entries showed a pattern. Client dinner, Helena V., appeared every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 weeks. Always at the same time, always lasting exactly 3 hours. But Helena Vance lived in New York. Her company's Boston office was a satellite operation, and according to LinkedIn, she only visited quarterly. I leaned against the counter, staring at the evidence accumulating on my phone screen. The pattern was becoming clear, like a photograph developing in chemical solution. The late nights, the new perfume, the defensive explanations, and now a designer bag that cost more than most people's monthly salary. My wife was having an affair. The realization settled into my chest with surprising calm. No rage, no immediate heartbreak, just the cold satisfaction of solving a complex equation. I'd suspected for weeks but hadn't wanted to confront the variables. Now the data was undeniable. But who was Helena Vance in this scenario? A convenient fiction? A cover story? Or was someone else using Helena's name and reputation as camouflage? I climbed the stairs quietly, my mind already shifting into analytical mode. Vanessa was in our bedroom, the designer bag placed carefully on her dresser like a trophy. She'd changed into silk pajamas, the expensive set I'd bought her for Christmas that she claimed was too nice for regular use. "Everything okay?" she asked as I entered. "Perfect," I said, beginning to undress. "Just thinking about patterns." Patterns? Work stuff. Data analysis. You know how my brain operates, always looking for connections. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Sometimes connections are just coincidences, Elliot." I hung my shirt in the closet, considering her words. Maybe, but in my experience, coincidences are just patterns we haven't recognized yet. I slipped into bed beside her, maintaining the comfortable distance that had become our norm over the past few months. Vanessa turned off her bedside lamp, plunging the room into darkness. "Good night," she whispered. "Good night." But I didn't sleep. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and began planning my investigation. Because if Vanessa wanted to play corporate games with designer accessories and fictional business partners, I was going to show her what a real hostile takeover looked like. The bag sat on her dresser in the darkness, its presence both evidence and declaration. "A gift from a business partner," she'd said. By morning, I intended to know exactly who that partner was. I woke up at 5:30 to an empty bed and the sound of Vanessa's shower running. The designer bag still occupied its place of honor on her dresser, but something was different. The small white receipt I'd glimpsed inside the previous night was gone. Interesting. I dressed quietly and headed downstairs to make coffee, my mind already working through investigative strategies. As a data analyst, I understood that information was power, but only if you knew where to look and how to interpret what you found. Vanessa appeared 20 minutes later, dressed in a charcoal business suit that hugged her figure perfectly. She looked polished, professional, and slightly nervous. "Early meeting?" I asked, handing her a travel mug of coffee. "Conference call with the West Coast team. You know how it is." She accepted the mug without meeting my eyes. "Might be another late night tonight." "Of course it might." I sipped my own coffee, watching her reflection in the kitchen window. "These West Coast clients are demanding." "Very demanding." She gathered her purse and the new designer bag, slinging both over her shoulder with practiced ease. "Don't wait up if I'm late." "Wouldn't dream of it." She kissed my cheek, a brief, distracted peck that felt more like obligation than affection, and headed for the garage. I waited until I heard her car pulling out of the driveway before moving to the window and watching her BMW disappear down our tree-lined street. Then I went to work. My first call was to my sister Maggie, who managed a popular downtown bar called the Velvet Clam. If gossip was currency, Maggie was the Federal Reserve of Boston's business district. "Little brother," she answered on the second ring. "Isn't it early for a social call?" "Need a favor, Mags. Information gathering." Ah, the plot thickens. What kind of information? The kind that flows freely after 5 o'clock in establishments that serve overpriced whiskey to overpaid executives. Maggie laughed. You want me to pump my customers for gossip? How deliciously scandalous. What's the target? Whitfield and Crane Ventures. Specifically, anyone connected to Helena Vance or the Morrison account. Helena Vance rings a bell. Ice queen with expensive taste and a reputation for hostile takeovers. What's your interest? I chose my words carefully. Let's call it market research. Market research, my rear end. This is about Vanessa, isn't it? My sister's intuition had always been razor sharp. Maybe. Elliot, what's going on? I'll explain later. Can you help? Of course, but you owe me dinner and details. After hanging up, I called my second resource, Omar Hassan, my former MIT roommate who now ran a cybersecurity consulting firm. If Maggie was my source for human intelligence, Omar was my gateway to digital reconnaissance. Elliot, how's married life treating you? Like a complex algorithm with missing variables, I said. Need some technical assistance? Legal technical assistance, I hope. Completely above board. Public records, social media analysis, that sort of thing. What's the target? Helena Vance, venture capitalist. Also anyone connected to Whitfield and Crane Ventures who might be using her name as cover. Omar was quiet for a moment. This sounds personal. It's becoming personal. All right. Give me a few hours. I'll see what the internet knows about Ms. Vance and her associates. With my intelligence network activated, I turned my attention to more immediate concerns. Vanessa had taken the receipt, but she'd left something potentially more valuable, her laptop's browsing history. We shared a home computer network, and Vanessa often worked from her personal laptop when she brought projects home. As the household's unofficial IT support, I had administrative access to our router logs and network traffic data. What I found was illuminating. Over the past 2 months, Vanessa's laptop had made frequent connections to the Meridian Hotel's guest Wi-Fi network. The timestamps corresponded perfectly with her client dinner calendar entries. But more interesting were the other sites she'd visited during those sessions: luxury shopping websites, jewelry stores, and high-end restaurants. Someone was definitely spending money on my wife. The question was who. My phone buzzed with a text from Omar. Preliminary results. Helena Vance is currently in Singapore for a month-long business trip. Has been since 3 weeks ago. Want me to dig deeper? The pieces clicked into place like tumblers in a lock. Helena Vance wasn't in Boston. She couldn't be taking Vanessa to dinner twice a week or giving her expensive gifts. Someone else was using Helena's name as camouflage. I texted back, yes. Focus on Whitfield and Crane employees. Senior level, male. While waiting for Omar's response, I decided to conduct some field research. The Meridian Hotel was a 30-minute drive from our house, and I had a sudden urge to see it for myself. The Meridian occupied a full city block in Boston's financial district, its glass and steel facade reflecting the morning sun like a mirror. I parked across the street and studied the building, trying to understand its appeal for clandestine meetings. The hotel's main entrance was discreet but elegant, with valet parking and doormen who looked like they'd been trained to forget faces. The perfect place for someone who valued privacy over publicity. I was about to leave when I spotted a familiar figure emerging from the hotel's revolving door. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He moved with the confident stride of someone accustomed to deference and attention. I didn't recognize him immediately, but something about his bearing suggested importance. He climbed into a black Mercedes with tinted windows, and I managed to catch the license plate before he disappeared into traffic. Back home, I ran the plate through a public records database, another useful skill from my analytical toolkit. The Mercedes was registered to Marcus Whitfield, age 47, CEO of Whitfield and Crane Ventures. Marcus Whitfield. The name appeared on Vanessa's LinkedIn connections, and a quick search revealed his profile. Harvard MBA, 20 years in venture capital, recently divorced, no children. His company photo showed the same silver-haired man I'd seen leaving the Meridian. My phone rang. Omar. "Found your mystery man," he said without preamble. "Marcus Whitfield, CEO of Whitfield and Crane. Interesting character. Divorced 6 months ago after his ex-wife discovered he'd been using company funds to finance his extracurricular activities." "What kind of activities?" "The expensive kind involving women who weren't his wife. The divorce was messy, but he managed to keep his job by paying back the company and agreeing to increased board oversight." "Sounds like a pattern. Gets better. Guess who's been posting photos from Boston's finest restaurants and hotels over the past 2 months? And guess who's been carefully cropped out of those photos, but whose reflection occasionally appears in wine glasses and mirrors?" My grip tightened on the phone. "Show me." "Sending links now. Check your email." The photos Omar sent were a masterclass in careful composition. Marcus at expensive restaurants, always at tables for 2, but only 1 person visible in the frame. Marcus at hotel bars, raising champagne glasses in toasts to someone just outside the camera's range. Marcus at jewelry stores, examining pieces that were clearly intended for feminine hands. But the reflections told a different story. In the polished surface of a wine glass, I caught a glimpse of auburn hair. In a mirror behind Marcus's shoulder at a restaurant, the suggestion of a familiar profile. In the window of a jewelry store, the ghost image of a woman who looked remarkably like my wife. The final piece of evidence arrived via text from Maggie. "Your Helena Vance inquiry paid off. One of my regulars works at Whitfield and Crane. Says the whole office knows Marcus Whitfield is having an affair with someone from outside the company. Word is she's married, classy, and expensive to maintain. Also heard he bought her a Hermes bag last week to celebrate some business deal." I stared at the message until the words blurred together. The data was complete now, the pattern undeniable. My wife was having an affair with Marcus Whitfield, and he was financing their relationship with the same reckless abandon that had ended his marriage. But unlike Marcus's ex-wife, I wasn't going to confront this situation with tears and accusations. I was going to approach it like any other hostile acquisition, with careful planning, strategic timing, and overwhelming force. I opened my laptop and began researching Marcus Whitfield's professional vulnerabilities. His company, his board of directors, his investors, his upcoming business commitments. If he wanted to play corporate games with my wife, I was going to teach him the difference between a friendly merger and a complete takeover. The designer bag upstairs wasn't just evidence of an affair, it was a declaration of war. And Marcus Whitfield had no idea what kind of opponent he'd just made. 3 days of surveillance had given me Marcus Whitfield's routine down to the minute. Coffee at 7:15 at a cafe near his office. Lunch at 12:30, usually at the same upscale bistro. Evening departure between 6 and 6:30, unless he had plans with my wife. Tonight was Thursday, which meant Vanessa had another client dinner with Helena Vance. I'd confirmed through Omar's continued monitoring that Helena was still in Singapore, making Vanessa's dinner plans particularly interesting. I positioned myself in the parking garage across from the Meridian Hotel at 5:45, armed with a telephoto lens borrowed from my neighbor's photography equipment and enough patience to wait for the perfect shot. Marcus arrived first, as expected. His black Mercedes glided into the hotel's valet circle with practiced ease. He emerged wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my car payment, his silver hair perfectly styled, his manner suggesting a man accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. Vanessa appeared 15 minutes later in her BMW, wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something black and elegant that hugged her curves and probably came from the same shopping expedition that had produced the designer bag. She handed her keys to the valet with the confidence of someone who belonged in this world of expensive hotels and discretionary spending. I watched through my telephoto lens as they met in the hotel's lobby. Marcus's hand found the small of her back, a gesture both possessive and intimate. Vanessa leaned into his touch, smiling up at him with an expression I hadn't seen directed at me in months. The photos I captured were crystal clear and completely damning. Marcus and Vanessa entering the hotel together, Marcus's hand on her waist as they walked toward the elevators, Vanessa laughing at something he whispered in her ear, her face animated with genuine happiness. But I wanted more than photographs. I wanted understanding. I parked my car and entered the hotel through a side entrance, making my way to the bar adjacent to the lobby. The Meridian's cocktail lounge was designed for discretion, dim lighting, private booths, and a clientele that valued anonymity over recognition. I chose a corner table with a clear view of the elevator bank and ordered a whiskey, settling in to observe my wife's affair in real time. They reappeared an hour later, both looking relaxed and intimate in the way that comes from shared secrets and physical closeness. Marcus had loosened his tie. Vanessa's hair was slightly mussed, and her lipstick had been refreshed. They chose a booth near the windows, far enough from other patrons to ensure privacy. I watched Marcus order champagne, expensive champagne based on the server's deferential manner, and present Vanessa with a small velvet box. Even from across the room, I could see her face light up as she opened it. Jewelry, obviously, something that made her press her hand to her chest and lean across the table to kiss him. My phone buzzed with a text from Maggie. Update on your Whitfield situation. My source says the board is getting nervous about his spending patterns again. Apparently, he's been using company entertainment accounts for personal expenses. Sound familiar? I typed back. Very familiar. How nervous is the board? Nervous enough to be asking questions? Want me to see if I can get specifics? Please. I watched Marcus and Vanessa toast whatever milestone the jewelry represented, their champagne glasses catching the bar's ambient lighting. They looked like a couple celebrating an anniversary or engagement, comfortable, affectionate, completely absorbed in each other. It was almost romantic if you ignored the fact that one of them was married to someone else. My phone buzzed again. Omar this time. Found something interesting in Whitfield's social media patterns. He's been posting a lot of photos from expensive restaurants lately, but always carefully cropped. Want me to see if I can recover the full images? Do it. I finished my whiskey and prepared to leave, but Vanessa chose that moment to excuse herself from the table. She headed toward the restrooms, passing within 10 feet of where I sat in my shadowy corner booth. For a terrifying moment, I thought she might see me. But she was looking at her phone, probably checking her appearance or reading messages, and walked past without a glance in my direction. She looked beautiful, radiant even. The kind of glow that comes from feeling desired and appreciated. It was a look I remembered from our early dating days, when everything between us was new and exciting and full of possibility. Marcus watched her walk away with the expression of a man completely infatuated. His eyes followed her movement across the room, and when she disappeared around a corner, he pulled out his phone and began typing what was probably a romantic text message. I hated him in that moment, not just for taking my wife, but for making her happy in ways I apparently couldn't anymore. When Vanessa returned to their table, she was glowing even brighter. Whatever message Marcus had sent had clearly pleased her. She slid into the booth beside him instead of across from him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders with casual possessiveness. They stayed for another hour, sharing appetizers and intimate conversation. I watched them like a scientist observing specimens, cataloging their interactions and body language. The way Marcus's thumb traced circles on Vanessa's shoulder. The way she laughed at his jokes with genuine delight. The way they leaned into each other when speaking, creating a bubble of privacy that excluded the rest of the world. By the time they left, I had enough photographic evidence to support a dozen divorce proceedings. But more importantly, I had a complete understanding of their relationship dynamic. This wasn't a casual affair or a moment of weakness. This was a full-blown romance, complete with expensive gifts, regular meetings, and obvious emotional investment from both parties. Marcus walked Vanessa to her car, kissing her goodnight with the tender intensity of new lovers. She drove away first, probably to maintain the illusion of separate arrivals and departures. Marcus waited 5 minutes before retrieving his own vehicle, a precaution that suggested they'd developed operational security procedures. I followed Vanessa home at a discreet distance, watching her BMW navigate our suburban neighborhood with the practiced ease of someone who'd made this transition many times before. From passionate lover back to dutiful wife, all in the span of a 30-minute drive. She arrived home at 10:15, carrying herself with the satisfied exhaustion of someone who'd had an excellent evening. I was already in my study, surrounded by printed photographs and research materials, when I heard her key in the front door. "Elliot," she called. "I'm home." "In here," I replied, quickly covering my evidence with innocuous work documents. She appeared in my doorway, still wearing the black dress and the jewelry Marcus had given her, a delicate gold necklace that caught the light when she moved. "How was your evening?" I asked. "Productive. Helena's very demanding, but the Morrison account is finally coming together." "I'm sure it is." I gestured at my desk. "Just catching up on some analysis myself. Data patterns, you know." "You work too hard." She moved behind my chair and placed her hands on my shoulders, massaging gently. "Come to bed soon?" Her touch felt like betrayal and invitation simultaneously. "In a few minutes." She kissed the top of my head, a gesture that might have seemed affectionate if I hadn't just watched her kiss another man with far more passion. "Don't stay up too late," she said, heading for the stairs. I waited until I heard our bedroom door close before uncovering my research materials. The photographs spread across my desk told a story of deception and romance, but they also revealed something else. Opportunity. Marcus Whitfield was making the same mistakes that had destroyed his previous marriage, using company resources for personal expenses, mixing business with pleasure in ways that created liability for his firm, trusting that his private life would remain private. But I wasn't his ex-wife. I wasn't going to settle for a quiet divorce and a financial settlement. I was going to use his own tactics against him, leveraging his vulnerabilities into a complete strategic victory. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to Theodore Crane, chairman of Whitfield and Crane's board of directors. The message was carefully worded, expressing concern about potential misuse of company resources and suggesting a discreet internal audit of executive entertainment expenses. I didn't sign it with my real name, of course. Anonymous tips carried more weight when they couldn't be traced back to personal motivations. The email went out at 11:37 p.m., just as I heard Vanessa's breathing settle into the rhythm of sleep upstairs. Phase 2 of my hostile takeover was officially underway. Theodore Crane's response to my anonymous tip was swifter than I'd anticipated. By Friday afternoon, Omar had intercepted chatter on Whitfield and Crane's internal communications, suggesting an emergency board meeting scheduled for Monday morning. "Someone rattled the right cage," Omar reported during our coffee meeting at a neutral location downtown. "The company's financial audit team is pulling expense reports going back 6 months. "How comprehensive an audit?" I asked, stirring sugar into my espresso with deliberate calm. "The kind that examines every receipt, every client entertainment expense, every company credit card transaction. Marcus Whitfield's spending patterns are about to get very public, very quickly." I nodded, feeling the satisfaction of a well-executed strategy beginning to unfold. "What's the timeline?" "Board meeting Monday at 9 a.m. If they find what I think they're going to find, Marcus will be answering some uncomfortable questions by lunchtime." Meanwhile, Maggie had been conducting her own intelligence gathering at the Velvet Clam. Her Friday night report was equally promising. "Your boy Marcus has been bragging to anyone who'll listen about his new relationship," she told me over the phone. "Apparently, he's completely smitten with some mysterious married woman. My bartender says he's been showing off photos and talking about expensive gifts." "What kind of photos?" "The carefully cropped kind that hide faces but show enough to make it clear he's not dining alone." Also heard he's been asking around about discreet jewelry stores and high-end boutiques. Someone's spending serious money on this romance. Company money? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It was indeed. And by Monday morning, Theodore Crane and the board of directors would have a definitive answer. But I wasn't content to wait for the corporate machinery to grind Marcus into powder. I wanted to apply more direct pressure to make him understand that his actions had consequences beyond boardroom embarrassment. Saturday evening provided the perfect opportunity. Vanessa announced she was having dinner with her friend Janine, a convenient fiction that would give her several hours of unaccounted time. I knew from my surveillance that Saturday nights were reserved for Marcus's apartment, a luxury penthouse in Boston's Back Bay that offered privacy and convenience for their romantic interludes. "Don't wait up," she said, kissing my cheek with the casual affection of long marriage. "Janine's going through a rough patch with her divorce. I might be late." "Take your time," I replied. "I have some projects to work on anyway." She left at 6:30, wearing jeans and a cashmere sweater that struck the perfect balance between casual and elegant. I watched her BMW disappear down our street, then waited exactly 15 minutes before implementing my own evening plans. Marcus's building was the kind of place that screamed expensive exclusivity, marble lobby, uniformed doorman, security cameras that probably cost more than most people's cars. But expensive security systems were designed to keep strangers out, not to monitor residents' guests. I'd spent the week studying the building's routines and vulnerabilities. The doorman took smoking breaks every hour on the hour, stepping outside for exactly 5 minutes. The security cameras covered the main entrance and elevator bank, but had blind spots near the service corridors and emergency exits. At 7:45, I entered through the building's parking garage, using a key card I'd cloned from Marcus's wallet during a carefully orchestrated bump at his favorite coffee shop earlier in the week. Modern technology made such acquisitions surprisingly simple, especially when your target was distracted by romantic text messages from his married lover. Marcus's penthouse occupied the building's top floor, accessible by private elevator, but private elevators required private codes, and I hadn't been able to acquire that particular piece of information. Fortunately, I didn't need to reach the penthouse to send my message. Marcus's reserved parking space was clearly marked and contained his black Mercedes, positioned with the meticulous care of someone who treated his vehicle as an extension of his personal brand. The car was immaculate, freshly detailed, and probably worth more than most people's annual salaries. I pulled out my phone and took several photographs of the license plate, the vehicle identification number visible through the windshield, and the general condition of the car. Then I retrieved a small can of black spray paint from my jacket pocket. The message I left on Marcus's driver's side door was simple and direct. Thief. Not elegant, perhaps, but effective, and completely accurate, given his pattern of using company resources to finance his personal relationships. I was back in my own car and halfway home before Marcus and Vanessa finished their romantic dinner upstairs. The security cameras would show a figure in dark clothing and a baseball cap, but nothing identifiable. The timing would suggest someone with knowledge of Marcus's schedule and personal habits. In other words, the vandalism would feel personal, because it was personal. Sunday morning brought the first indication that my message had been received. Omar called at 8 a.m. with an update from his monitoring of Marcus's digital communications. "Your boy had an interesting evening," he reported. Police report filed at 11:30 p.m. for vandalism of personal property. Building security is reviewing footage, but apparently the cameras didn't capture anything useful. "How unfortunate," I said, pouring coffee with steady hands. "Gets better." Marcus sent about 20 text messages to various contacts, trying to figure out who might have targeted him. He's paranoid and angry, which means he's making mistakes. "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind where he's accusing business rivals and ex-wives and basically anyone who might have a grudge. He's not thinking clearly, which makes him vulnerable." Vulnerable was exactly where I wanted Marcus Whitfield. Angry, paranoid, and making poor decisions under pressure. Vanessa spent Sunday in an unusually good mood, humming while she prepared breakfast and suggesting we take a walk through our neighborhood. She was affectionate and attentive, the way she used to be during the early years of our marriage. "You seem happy," I observed, as we strolled past the manicured lawns and expensive houses that defined our suburban enclave. "I am happy," she replied, squeezing my hand. "Work's been going well, and I feel like we're in a good place." "A good place," I repeated. "That's one way to describe it." She glanced at me sideways, perhaps detecting something in my tone. "Is everything all right, Elliot? You've seemed distant lately." "Just work stress. You know how it is when you're analyzing complex data sets. Sometimes the patterns don't become clear until you step back and look at the bigger picture." "Well, try not to let it consume you. Life's too short to spend it buried in spreadsheets and algorithms." Life was indeed too short for lies and deception and designer bags purchased with other men's money. But I didn't share that observation with my wife. Instead, I squeezed her hand back and smiled. "You're absolutely right. Sometimes you have to take action based on the data you have." Monday morning arrived with the crisp efficiency of a well-planned military operation. I was in my office by 7 a.m., ostensibly working on legitimate projects, but actually monitoring the digital chatter surrounding Whitfield and Crane Ventures. The board meeting began at 9 a.m. sharp. By 9:30, Omar was feeding me real-time updates based on his monitoring of the company's internal communications. "Emergency session extended indefinitely," he reported via encrypted message. "Financial audit team presenting findings to full board. Multiple references to irregularities and policy violations." At 10:15, Marcus called into private session with Theodore Crane and 2 other board members, company lawyers present. At 11 a.m., Human Resources Director summoned to board meeting. "This is getting serious." By noon, the corporate machinery I'd set in motion 6 days earlier had reached its inevitable conclusion. Marcus Whitfield was suspended, pending a full investigation into his use of company resources for personal expenses. The news broke on financial websites by 2 p.m., buried in the business sections, but devastating for anyone whose livelihood depended on Whitfield and Crane's reputation and stability. "Venture capital firm suspends CEO amid expense account investigation," read the headline in the Boston Business Journal. I printed the article and filed it with my growing collection of evidence, then began preparing for the evening's entertainment. Vanessa would be coming home soon, probably having heard the news through her own professional networks. She'd be worried about Marcus, concerned about the implications for their relationship, and completely unaware that her husband had orchestrated the entire sequence of events. Tonight, I was going to begin revealing exactly how much I knew about her extracurricular activities. The endgame was finally beginning. Vanessa came home that evening looking like she'd been struck by lightning. Her usual composure was shattered, replaced by the hollow-eyed shock of someone whose carefully constructed world had just collapsed. "Did you hear about Whitfield and Crane?" she asked, dropping her purse and the designer bag on the kitchen counter with none of her usual care. "Something about an investigation," I replied, not looking up from the newspaper I was pretending to read. "Financial irregularities, wasn't it?" "Marcus Whitfield has been suspended. The whole company is in chaos." "Marcus Whitfield," I repeated, as if trying to place the name. "Isn't he the one you've been working with on the Morrison account?" Vanessa's face went pale. "Yes, I mean indirectly, through Helena Vance." "Right. Helena Vance." I folded the newspaper and looked at my wife with what I hoped appeared to be casual interest. "This must complicate your project considerably. Everything's on hold pending the investigation. They're auditing all client relationships, all expense accounts, all business partnerships." "Sounds thorough," I said. "I'm sure they'll get to the bottom of whatever happened." Vanessa stared at me for a long moment, perhaps trying to determine if my words carried hidden meaning. But I kept my expression neutral, concerned, but not suspicious. "I need a drink," she said finally. "Of course, it's been a stressful day." I watched her pour a generous glass of wine, noting the slight tremor in her hands. The woman who'd been glowing with romantic satisfaction just days earlier now looked like she was facing an execution, which, in a sense, she was. Over the following week, I watched Marcus Whitfield's professional life disintegrate with the methodical precision of a controlled demolition. The board's investigation revealed a pattern of expense account abuse stretching back months, including charges for luxury hotels, expensive restaurants, jewelry purchases, and designer boutiques. None of the expenses were technically fraudulent. Marcus had been careful to structure them as legitimate business entertainment. But the pattern was unmistakable, especially when cross-referenced with his romantic activities. Theodore Crane, the board chairman, was a 70-year-old Boston Brahmin who'd built his reputation on fiscal responsibility and corporate governance. The idea that his hand-picked CEO had been using company funds to finance an extramarital affair was precisely the kind of scandal that could destroy decades of careful reputation management. By Thursday, Marcus had been terminated for cause. By Friday, Whitfield and Crane had issued a public statement distancing themselves from their former CEO and announcing a comprehensive review of all executive compensation and expense policies. Vanessa spent the week in a state of barely controlled panic, jumping every time her phone rang and checking news websites obsessively. She claimed to be worried about the impact on her own projects, but I could see the deeper fear in her eyes. She was terrified that her relationship with Marcus would be discovered and exposed. On Saturday morning, she received a phone call that changed everything. "The Whitfield and Crane annual gala is still happening," she announced after hanging up. "Next Friday at the Fairmont Copley. They want to project stability and continuity despite the recent troubles." "Are you still invited?" I asked. "Yes. As a key client partner, I'm expected to attend. It's important for maintaining relationships during this transition period." "Of course it is." I set down my coffee cup and studied her face. "I assume I'm invited as your +1?" Vanessa hesitated, clearly weighing her options. Attending alone would look suspicious, but bringing me would complicate any interaction with Marcus, who would presumably also be there as a private citizen, if not as CEO. "If you'd like to come," she said finally. "Though it might be boring, lots of corporate networking and business talk." "I find corporate dynamics fascinating," I replied. "All those complex relationships and hidden motivations. It's like a real-time case study in human behavior." "Then you should definitely come." "Perfect, absolutely perfect." I spent the following week making my own preparations for the gala. A new suit, appropriately formal but not ostentatious. A leather portfolio suitable for carrying important documents, and most importantly, a complete dossier of evidence documenting Vanessa's affair and Marcus's financial improprieties. The divorce papers were prepared by Wednesday, signed and notarized and ready for service. My attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in high-asset dissolutions, had structured the filing to maximize both financial recovery and public embarrassment. "Are you sure you want to serve these at a public event?" she asked during our final consultation. "It's certainly dramatic, but it might complicate the proceedings." "I'm not interested in a quiet dissolution," I replied. "This is about accountability and consequences. Public actions deserve public responses. Your choice, but be prepared for media attention. Corporate scandals involving adultery tend to attract reporters." Media attention was exactly what I was hoping for. Friday evening arrived with the crisp clarity of a perfect October night. Vanessa spent 2 hours getting ready, choosing a midnight blue gown that emphasized her figure and complemented the jewelry Marcus had given her over the past months. She looked stunning, elegant, sophisticated, and completely unaware that she was dressing for her own professional funeral. "You look beautiful," I told her as we prepared to leave. Thank you. She adjusted her necklace, the gold piece Marcus had given her at the Meridian Hotel, and checked her appearance one final time. Ready? Absolutely. The Fairmont Copley Plaza was Boston's premier venue for corporate events, its grand ballroom designed to impress clients and intimidate competitors. Tonight, it was filled with venture capitalists, entrepreneurs, and financial journalists, all eager to see how Whitfield and Crane would handle their first public appearance since Marcus's termination. Vanessa and I arrived fashionably late, making our entrance just as the cocktail hour was reaching its peak. She immediately began working the room with professional efficiency, introducing me to colleagues and clients while maintaining the perfect balance of confidence and concern about recent events. I played my role as the supportive husband, making appropriate small talk while scanning the crowd for Marcus Whitfield. He was easy to spot, standing near the bar, surrounded by a small group of supporters, but clearly isolated from the main corporate hierarchy. He looked older than he had just 2 weeks earlier, his silver hair less perfectly styled, his expensive suit unable to disguise the weight of recent failures, but his eyes were sharp and angry, suggesting a man who blamed others for his downfall. "There's Marcus," Vanessa murmured as we moved through the crowd. "I should probably say hello. Show support during his difficult time." "Of course," I replied. "Professional courtesy is important." We approached Marcus's group just as the conversation was turning to his legal options and potential comeback strategies. He greeted Vanessa with careful warmth, acknowledging me with the polite distance appropriate for a colleague's spouse. "Elliot, isn't it?" he said, extending his hand. "Vanessa's mentioned you. Data analysis, right?" "That's correct." I shook his hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact. "I specialize in pattern recognition and strategic forecasting." "Useful skills in any industry," Marcus replied. "Perhaps we should talk sometime about consulting opportunities." I'd be very interested in that conversation. We chatted for several more minutes, discussing market trends and investment strategies, while Vanessa stood between us, probably wondering if either of us suspected the truth about her double life. Then Theodore Crane approached the podium to begin the evening's formal presentations. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of old money and older power. "Thank you for joining us tonight as we celebrate Whitfield and Crane's continued commitment to excellence and innovation." The speech was carefully crafted to acknowledge recent challenges while projecting confidence in the company's future. Crane spoke about integrity, accountability, and the importance of maintaining trust in professional relationships. It was the perfect setup for what I had planned. As Crane concluded his remarks and the crowd began to disperse toward the dinner tables, I excused myself from Vanessa and Marcus, claiming I needed to make a quick phone call. Instead, I retrieved my leather portfolio from the coat check and made my way back to the ballroom, timing my return to coincide with the lull between cocktails and dinner service. Vanessa and Marcus were standing near the windows, engaged in what appeared to be an intense private conversation. Her hand was on his arm, her expression concerned and intimate. His posture suggested frustration and barely controlled anger. They looked like lovers discussing strategy during a crisis, which was exactly what they were. I approached them with the calm confidence of a man about to execute a perfectly planned operation. "Vanessa," I said, loud enough to be heard by nearby guests, "I have something for you." She turned, probably expecting me to hand her a drink or relay a message from one of her colleagues. Instead, I presented her with a manila envelope containing our divorce papers. "What is this?" she asked, her voice carrying the first hint of alarm. "Legal documents," I replied, maintaining conversational volume, but speaking clearly enough for surrounding guests to overhear. "I thought you might want to review them before they become public record." Vanessa opened the envelope with trembling fingers, her face going white as she scanned the first page. The word divorce was prominently displayed in bold legal typeface, impossible to miss or misinterpret. "Elliot," she whispered. What are you doing? Pattern recognition, I replied, and strategic forecasting. Then I turned to Marcus, who was staring at the divorce papers with the expression of a man watching his remaining career prospects evaporate in real time. Mr. Whitfield, I said, extending a second envelope. This is for you. What is it? He asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't be pleasant. A comprehensive analysis of your expense account irregularities over the past 6 months, cross-referenced with hotel records, restaurant receipts, and jewelry purchases. I thought the board might find it interesting reading. Marcus opened the envelope, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and finally pure rage as he realized what he was holding. You, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You're the one who compiled publicly available information into a coherent narrative? I interrupted. Yes, that's exactly what I did. It's called data analysis, Mr. Whitfield. I'm very good at it. By now, our conversation had attracted the attention of nearby guests, including several members of Whitfield and Crane's board of directors and at least 2 financial journalists. The elegant murmur of cocktail party conversation was giving way to focused attention on our small drama. Theodore Crane appeared at my elbow, his expression grim. What exactly is happening here? He demanded. Just sharing some research findings, I replied, handing him a third envelope. Your former CEO has been using company resources to finance his relationship with my wife. I thought you should have documentation for your legal proceedings. The silence that followed was absolute. Every conversation in our immediate vicinity stopped as the implications of my statement registered with the crowd. Vanessa stood frozen, divorce papers clutched in her hands, her face a mask of horror and humiliation. Marcus looked like a man who'd just been struck by lightning, his mouth opening and closing without producing sound. Theodore Crane examined the documents I'd given him, his expression growing darker with each page. Mr. Ashford, he said finally, these are very serious allegations. They're not allegations, I replied. They're documented facts. Bank records, hotel receipts, photographic evidence, communication logs. Everything you need to pursue both civil and criminal remedies. Helena Vance, the real Helena Vance who had returned from Singapore just in time for the gala, pushed through the crowd to join our group. What's this about someone using my name? She demanded. Your former CEO has been telling his married lover that she was having business dinners with you, I explained, as cover for their affair. I have documentation of at least 12 occasions when he claimed to be meeting with you while you were actually in Singapore. Helena's face went rigid with professional fury. Marcus, is this true? Marcus finally found his voice. It's not what it looks like. It looks like fraud, Helena interrupted. Identity fraud, corporate fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. How exactly is that not what it looks like? The crowd around us had grown larger, drawn by the unfolding drama like spectators at a traffic accident. I could see smartphones being raised, capturing video of Boston's most spectacular corporate meltdown in recent memory. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Elliot, please, can we discuss this privately? We had 15 years to discuss things privately, I replied. You chose to conduct your business in public venues with company credit cards. I'm simply returning the favor. Theodore Crane closed the document folder and looked at Marcus with the expression of a man who'd just discovered a snake in his garden. Security will escort you from the premises, he announced. Our attorneys will be in contact regarding recovery of funds and potential criminal charges. You can't do this, Marcus protested. I have rights. You had responsibilities, Crane interrupted, which you abdicated in favor of personal gratification. The consequences are entirely of your own making. 2 security guards appeared as if summoned by telepathy, flanking Marcus with professional efficiency. This isn't over, Marcus said, looking directly at me. Yes, it is, I replied. Your career is finished, your reputation is destroyed, and your relationship with my wife is now public knowledge. I'd say we're completely finished. As security escorted Marcus toward the exit, Vanessa made one final attempt at damage control. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, trying to project confidence despite her obvious distress. I apologize for this disruption. There seems to be some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, I interrupted, loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear. You've been having an affair with Marcus Whitfield for 6 months. He's been using company money to buy you gifts and finance your relationship. I have photographs, receipts, hotel records, and communication logs documenting every aspect of your deception. The silence was deafening. Helena Vance stepped forward, her voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. Mrs. Ashford, your association with this company is terminated immediately. We'll be pursuing legal action to recover any funds or benefits improperly provided to you through Mr. Whitfield's malfeasance. Vanessa's composure finally cracked completely. Tears began streaming down her face as the full scope of her public humiliation became clear. Elliot, she pleaded, please don't do this. I'm not doing anything, I replied. I'm simply revealing what you've already done. I turned to address the crowd, many of whom were still recording the proceedings. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for disrupting your evening, but sometimes accountability requires public acknowledgement. My wife chose to conduct her affair in corporate settings using company resources. It seemed appropriate to reveal her choices in a similar venue. With that, I walked calmly toward the exit, leaving Vanessa standing alone in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by the wreckage of her professional and personal reputation. The last thing I heard as the elevator doors closed was the sound of 100 conversations erupting simultaneously as Boston's business elite began dissecting the evening's entertainment. My hostile takeover was complete. The aftermath was swift and merciless. By Saturday morning, videos of the gala confrontation had gone viral across social media platforms. Husband exposes wife's affair at corporate event became a trending topic, with multiple angles captured by smartphones and shared across professional networks. The Boston Business Journal ran a front-page story titled, Venture Capital Scandal Explodes at Public Gala, complete with photographs of Vanessa's tearful face and Marcus being escorted out by security. Helena Vance held a press conference announcing Whitfield and Crane's complete cooperation with authorities investigating Marcus's financial improprieties. She also revealed that the company would be pursuing civil action against both Marcus and any individuals who had benefited from his misuse of corporate resources, which meant Vanessa. I spent Saturday morning in my study, monitoring news coverage and social media reactions while sipping coffee and feeling the deep satisfaction of a perfectly executed strategy. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, attorneys, and curious friends, but I let them all go to voicemail. The only call I answered was from Maggie. Holy hell, little brother, she said without preamble. You just became a legend. The Velvet Clam was packed last night with people talking about your performance at the gala. Just following the data to its logical conclusion, I replied. The data, my rear end. That was pure theater. You destroyed both of them in front of half of Boston's business community. They destroyed themselves. I simply provided documentation. Well, your documentation is about to make you very wealthy. My lawyer friend says Vanessa's going to get cleaned out in the divorce proceedings, especially with all that evidence of adultery and financial misconduct. Wealthy wasn't my primary motivation, but I had to admit the prospect of financial justice was appealing. Vanessa had spent months enjoying expensive gifts purchased with stolen money. It seemed appropriate that she should face corresponding consequences. At noon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Detective Ray Sanderson, whom I recognized from Maggie's bar, standing on my front porch with an official expression. Mr. Ashford, I'm Detective Sanderson, Boston PD. I'd like to ask you a few questions about recent events. Of course, Detective. Please come in. We sat in my living room, where Sanderson pulled out a small notebook and pen. I'm investigating allegations of corporate fraud and identity theft related to Marcus Whitfield and Whitfield and Crane Ventures. Your name came up as someone with relevant information. I'd be happy to cooperate, I said. What would you like to know? Let's start with how you discovered Mr. Whitfield's financial irregularities. I walked him through my investigation, emphasizing the public nature of all the information I'd gathered: hotel records, restaurant receipts, social media posts, expense account documentation. Everything had been obtained through legitimate channels or provided by whistleblowers within the company. You didn't hack any computer systems or engage in any surveillance activities that might be considered illegal? Sanderson asked. Nothing illegal, Detective. I'm a data analyst by profession. I simply applied my skills to publicly available information. And the anonymous tip to the board of directors? Anonymous tips are protected speech, as I'm sure you know. Citizens have both the right and the responsibility to report suspected corporate malfeasance. Sanderson made notes, nodding occasionally. What about the vandalism to Mr. Whitfield's vehicle? The word thief spray-painted on his car door? I wouldn't know anything about that, I replied truthfully, though I understand the description was accurate, given his misuse of company funds. Mr. Whitfield seems to think you were responsible. Mr. Whitfield seems to think a lot of things that aren't supported by evidence. That's probably how he got into this situation in the first place. After another 20 minutes of questions, Sanderson closed his notebook and stood to leave. One more thing, Mr. Ashford. Mr. Whitfield has made some threats about retaliation. If you experience any harassment or intimidation, please contact us immediately. I appreciate the concern, Detective, but I think Mr. Whitfield has more pressing problems to worry about than revenge fantasies. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang just as Sanderson was leaving. The caller ID showed Marcus's number. Elliot. His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. We need to talk. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Marcus. You destroyed my career, my reputation, my entire life. For what? A cheating wife who was never worth the effort? Your career was destroyed by your own actions. I simply documented them. Meet me tonight. The parking garage at the Meridian Hotel, 9 o'clock. I don't think so. I'm not asking, Elliot. I'm telling you. You owe me a face-to-face conversation after what you've done. The line went silent. I stared at my phone, considering my options. Marcus was desperate, angry, and probably not thinking clearly. Meeting him alone in a parking garage seemed like an excellent way to create more problems than it solved. On the other hand, I was curious about what he thought he could accomplish, and I had to admit, there was something appealing about the opportunity to see Marcus Whitfield's complete humiliation up close. At 8:30, I drove to the Meridian Hotel and parked across the street, where I could observe the parking garage entrance without being seen. If Marcus was planning something stupid, I wanted advance warning. He arrived at 8:50, driving a different car, probably a rental, since his Mercedes had been repossessed along with most of his other assets. He looked haggard and desperate, wearing jeans and a wrinkled shirt instead of his usual expensive suits. I waited until 9:15 before walking across the street and entering the garage. Marcus was standing beside a concrete pillar on the 3rd level, smoking a cigarette with shaking hands. You came, he said as I approached. You sounded desperate. I was curious to see how desperate. Desperate enough to offer you a deal. What kind of deal? I'll disappear. Leave Boston, start over somewhere else. In exchange, you back off the legal pressure. Stop feeding information to the prosecutors and the civil attorneys. I studied his face, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the tremor in his voice. This was a man who'd lost everything and was grasping for any possible escape route. Why would I agree to that? I asked. Because if you don't, I'll make sure Vanessa suffers as much as possible. I'll drag her through every court proceeding, every deposition, every public hearing. I'll make her the face of this scandal. Vanessa's already the face of this scandal. Her choices made that inevitable. I can make it worse. How? Marcus smiled, and for the first time since I'd known about him, he looked genuinely dangerous. I kept records too, Elliot. Photos, videos, text messages, emails, very intimate records, the kind that would be extremely embarrassing if they became public. Revenge adult material, I said. That's a felony in Massachusetts. Only if I release them. But if I'm facing prison time anyway, what do I have to lose? I considered his threat, weighing the potential consequences. Vanessa had made her own choices, but I didn't want to see her subjected to that level of public humiliation. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. I disappear quietly. You stop cooperating with the investigations. In 6 months, when the media attention dies down, I come back and start rebuilding my career. And if I refuse? Then we all go down together. Me, you, Vanessa, and anyone else who gets caught in the crossfire. I walked closer to Marcus, studying his face in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the parking garage. You know what your problem is, Marcus? Enlighten me. You still think this is a negotiation. You still think you have leverage. I just told you what leverage I have. No, you told me what you think you have, but you're operating from incomplete information. I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot of a news article from earlier that afternoon. Federal prosecutors announced they're treating your case as a RICO investigation. Organized financial fraud with multiple victims across state lines. That's a federal crime, Marcus, which means federal prison. His face went pale as he read the headline. They're also investigating your threats against witnesses, I continued, including the threatening phone call you made to me 3 hours ago, which Detective Sanderson was kind enough to record. You're lying. Am I? Check your phone. You should have received a call from your attorney about an hour ago. Marcus fumbled for his phone, checking his missed calls. His expression confirmed that I was telling the truth. Your attorney's advice was probably to stop making threats and start negotiating a plea agreement, I said, because threatening witnesses in a federal investigation is an excellent way to turn a 5-year sentence into a 15-year sentence. This isn't over, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, it is. Your career is finished, your reputation is destroyed, your assets are frozen, and your freedom is measured in months, not years. The only question now is whether you make things worse for yourself with continued stupidity. I turned to walk away, then paused and looked back. Oh, and Marcus? If any intimate images of my wife appear anywhere ever, I'll make sure the federal prosecutors know exactly who to blame. Revenge adult content is a federal crime when it crosses state lines, which means it would be added to your existing charges. You think you've won, he called after me. I know I've won. The data doesn't lie. I left Marcus standing alone in the parking garage, a broken man facing the consequences of his own choices. The next morning brought news that Marcus had been arrested at Logan Airport, apparently attempting to board a flight to the Cayman Islands with false identification documents. The federal charges now included attempted flight to avoid prosecution, which would likely add several more years to his eventual sentence. Vanessa moved out of our house that afternoon, taking only her personal belongings and leaving behind the designer bag that had started my investigation. She didn't ask for a reconciliation or offer any apologies. She simply packed her things and left, probably to stay with friends who hadn't yet abandoned her. I found a note on the kitchen counter. Elliot, I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't blame you. What I did was wrong, and I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I hope someday you can find happiness with someone who deserves you. V. I read the note twice, then threw it away. By evening, the house felt different. Quieter, but also cleaner somehow, as if a source of contamination had been removed. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in my study, surrounded by the evidence files that had brought down Marcus Whitfield and ended my marriage. My phone buzzed with a text from Maggie. Drinks tomorrow night? I'm buying. Sure, I replied. I have some celebrating to do. Celebrating what? I looked around my study, at the financial documents and legal papers that represented the complete destruction of two people who had betrayed my trust and stolen my money. Pattern recognition, I typed back, and strategic forecasting. Outside my window, Boston's skyline glittered in the darkness, full of opportunities and possibilities. Somewhere in that city, Marcus Whitfield was sitting in a federal holding cell, contemplating the ruins of his life. Somewhere else, Vanessa was probably crying into a glass of wine, wondering how her perfect affair had turned into such a complete disaster. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about the future and all the interesting patterns it might contain. The designer bag still sat on the kitchen counter where Vanessa had left it, a monument to greed and deception. Tomorrow I would donate it to charity. Let someone else enjoy the fruits of Marcus Whitfield's corporate theft. Tonight, I was content to sit in my study and savor the satisfaction of a perfectly executed revenge. Some gifts keep on giving, some take everything, and some, like the gift of seeing your enemies destroy themselves, are absolutely priceless.